hear my voice coming out of my mouth? Okay.
My cat's breath smells like cat food.
That is an appropriate smell to be coming out of a cat.
And that leaves me for last, I think.
Hold on. 1 second, sorry. Fixing my audio once. And now I can.
All right, I'll go first then. Hello, my name is Rachel. I am she, her. I am a freelancer. I've done work mostly for Onyx Path. I did the quick start for V5, and I'm also editing and writing for a really fun game called Mora, which is all about translating film to RPGs. So I'm excited to be here.
Well, I guess I'll go. My name is Alexander Ward. I'm an actor who specializes in playing monsters and creatures and things that aren't necessarily human. And I am also one of the actors who is on LA by Night, and I play Jasper.
I'll go. Hi, I'm Shayne Eastin. I am an actor and a writer and director in Los Angeles. I've done a lot of horror films and shows. You can see me in Better Off Zed on Amazon right now, as well as The Monster Project. I also play Ember in the Delusion virtual reality series, Lies Within. And I'm also on LA by Night. I play Jasper's best friend, Katya. So nice to see you guys. Happy to be here.
I'm Steffie. I'm a freelance author and developer. I write for the World of Darkness, Chronicles of Darkness, Cthulhu. I developed The Fall of London for Modiphius for V5, and I have a tiny chapter in the V5 Anarchs book because the Anarchs are the best vampire group.
Hey.
Boo.
We'll talk.
All right. Yeah. I believe they can't hear you. I'm looking at chat right now. It doesn't look like they can hear you.
I had my mic muted. That is my apologies. Really quick, let me redo my introduction. I'm Nick Francia. I'm a visual effects artist and VFX supervisor. I also work as a content designer for Rogue Robot Studios, and I love horror movies. And that's what we're here to talk about today, and how you can bring stuff from horror movies and lessons you can learn and bring them directly to the tabletop.
Yes.
So
I also want to make it known that I'm wearing this shirt right now.
Oh.
There we go.
Yay.
Just because my camera was doing things. There we go.
All right, kind of the first point I want to give to you all here. In your mind, what is if you were to suggest a film to someone that would teach them, be like a good lesson for encompassing like horror and terror, like in terms of just like feeling like the atmosphere and like what horror and terror is at like a base definition, what film would you pick and why do you choose that?
Can I cheat and pick two?
Sure. There's no...
Okay. For one, I would pick Jurassic Park because I think that translates really well to a gaming table. So you've got a big group of people, sometimes they split up, sometimes they come back together, but there's always something keeping them moving, which are the dinosaurs, and it's something that they don't really know how to fight. And so I think that sort of tension and group dynamic works really well for a role-playing game. And then the other one is The Omen. And I really like The Omen because it takes a child who is supposed to be innocent and then turns them into this vehicle for pure evil. And that sort of escalation and realizations and revelations of like, oh, this is not normal and something is wrong is a really good way to demonstrate the sort of pacing you need to run a good horror game.
Yeah.
No, I agree with those. I think right now, if I could pick one that was a horror movie that is on the top of my list as of now because it changes all the time, would probably be Hereditary. Hereditary is an excellent film. It's rough. It's got some rough themes in it if you're not open to some of those, but it does a very good job of building an extreme amount of tension. And that's something that I think is integral to horror, because while a jump scare can startle you, tension and fear is slower. And Hereditary does that very well.
I will build on that concept and say I think that The Shining by Kubrick does a great job at building tension, along with the cinematography by John Alcott. The whole film, the environment itself and the cinematography, they kind of build the tension like nails slowly scratching on a chalkboard until you can't take it anymore till the very end. And I think also what it does is it takes something familiar like the family and it makes it terrifying.
Yeah. So I'm going to pick 3, but they all have the same theme, and they're Hush, Get Out, and The Invisible Man. And I like them because all 3 are very good in different ways at isolating their protagonist, whether that's because they are physically alone in the woods, or because they're the only black person in a sea of white people, or because they're convinced somebody's there who no one else can see. But that isolation aspect works really well in horror for me. And that's what all 3 of them do well.
Also, I want to add a little subcategory to what I said, in that there is also a film called A Tale of Two Sisters, which is a Japanese horror film that is a wonderful ghost story. And it also kind of deals with that isolation and not quite sure what's real and what's not.
I'm going to look that one up.
I think it's very interesting in all the films that you chose, because at the core of it, there's almost like a subtext of very like real life issues, whether Hereditary is, about grief, or The Invisible Man and Get Out, it's about like you said, isolation and real life issues, or even like Jurassic Park, which is like an allegory against like the science, and even Shining being just like that uneasiness, and as we mentioned in the previous panel, like the uncanniness of a person just slowly but unhinged, it's rather than just the monster or the killer itself in like a typical horror movie.
And like one thing I forgot to point out about Jurassic Park is sort of the same thing with The Omen, is that Jurassic Park inverts our expectations. So we're humans, we're top of the food chain, we run the world, we control everything. Oh, now we don't. Now we are being hunted.
Yes.
And so I think that sort of inversion of expectation is at the core of any good horror story.
And you think leading that to like a campaign, that's sort of where someone should start when they're designing an adventure or designing a session? They should start with that inversion?
Yes. What assumption are you going to invert? And then what are the steps that you're going to take to reveal that slowly along the way?
Yeah.
Now, taking those films, or just any films in general, are there, from any of your standpoints, is there any like tricks or lessons or like specific examples you can think of that you've looked at and been like, oh, I want to put that in my game, or oh, that would be really cool if I was a player and that happened to me, like if my GM used that?
Yeah, I'm mainly a player when it comes, but I do DM on occasion, or GM on occasion, and or storytell, and but I love taking something that the character's given me in their backstory or something they've said offhand, and sitting on that for an obscene amount of time, and then bringing it back a long time later and just in a way that they did not expect that remark or that little bit of backstory to be used against them in that way is one of my favorite things to have them. I love seeing their face light up when they realize where this is coming from. And it's just such a lovely moment of just, and also just when they, in a fearful setting of just that oh shit moment, that this thing I did, either I caused that or this is coming back from years ago and this whole issue is caused by my character. And it can be either hilarious or a terrifying prospect depending on the situation.
I really agree. I'm primarily a storyteller, and that moment when everyone at the table just has that moment of like, oh shit, that's really cool when you get to create that.
That just, oh my god, what is happening? Or that realization.
Yeah, when you give them like the twist or the cliffhanger, and I really like that.
Jason Carl is very good at doing that to me. Punishing me for all the mistakes I make.
That is definitely something we'll be safe for another question later. And we often people will refer to using characters' backstories against them in order to make the campaign or just the story in general more personal. They call it using knives, or you give your GM knives to use against your character specifically.
Yeah.
Now, sort of when we're kind of going back, so we talked about using that backstory. Is there anything else? Do you think that if you're being a GM and you're trying to run a horror game, that you should, try to jump scare or try to use what some might think of cheap tricks, but I feel like that's up to interpretation whether they're cheap or not, because they do have a reason.
I don't particularly do jump scares, but what I do like is mirrors, because everyone is terrified of them, and paintings where the people in the paintings move. And I've used that to really good effect with everyone I've used it on. But I think especially with mirrors, I think there's a kind of primal fear that if you look too long in a mirror, you might look at something else or someone else, or maybe that's just me, but I'm terrified of them. But every time I've used them in a game, that worked really well.
I agree. Mirrors you can be used to great effect in not just in tabletop, but in movies and other things. Just the mirrors in themselves. I mean, you're turning off your lights in your house at night, and you have to walk past a mirror. You're not looking at that mirror.
Oh no!
You are looking everywhere but that mirror. I have a mirror in my living room that is on the exact opposite wall of where my light switch is, and it is the worst thing in the world. I don't know why I have it there.
Yeah. I've got a mirror in the bathroom that I have to pass if I have to pee at night, and it's it's not there. It's not there. Yeah, mirrors are terrifying.
I'm not super into jump scares, really, or anything shocking, but I think that something that we learn, especially in filmmaking, is that the scariest part is the anticipation, and there can be great fear found in silence and in stillness. I think, and we all see that when we're playing at a table, is that the most terrified we feel during the game is when we're just stuck with somebody in a situation and we're just waiting to see what happens.
For me, I would say it depends on what kind of game you're running. So if you're running a horror game in the vein of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, use jump scares. Have the crazed axe murderer bust through the door and keep chasing you and appear in improbable locations. But if you're running something that's more of a slow burn, like American Horror Story, if you're running that sort of psychological terror, then you really wouldn't want to use jump scares.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's something that like I've had accidental jump scares happen at the table, and those work better than any jump scare I could have possibly built into the game because they happen naturally. But I don't tend to build jump scares into my games just because that's generally not how I storytell.
Yeah. And one of the first things I usually do is to make sure that the characters feel like they don't have anywhere to turn and they don't have anywhere to run. You know, like no one's coming to save you. You've got to, whatever is going on, it's coming for you, and you're going to have to fix it eventually somehow. And I like that tension, that moment where they realize like, oh, there's no getting out of this.
Yeah, we have to fix this or we don't get out. Like, you know, that kind of situation.
Just trapped.
Can I call the police? No. That's a bad idea in general. Don't. There's no cavalry, and and sometimes you can do that physically, like you're in the woods and there's no cell phone signal.
Right.
But you can also do it socially, like nobody believes you.
Mm-hmm. That's a terrifying prospect in
no one
itself.
can see the clown. No one else can see the clown. It's just you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Or even to go back to like a previous example, you can't leave the Overlook Hotel because there is a blizzard and you will freeze to death, and no one's going.
Yeah,
another way to look at that too is in Nightmare on Elm Street, Wes Craven, everybody has to go to sleep.
Yeah.
You can't escape that, and that's what made that film so terrifying was that you couldn't just, when Jaws came out, you could just avoid going to the beach. Yeah. That's fine. Yeah. But you can't avoid falling asleep.
Yeah.
Although, as a child, I also stayed away from pools because I was scared a shark was just going to appear in the pool.
Me too! Me too!
Same. And yeah, me too. Especially those big vents that they have underwater. I was convinced that people were hiding, like the pool owners were hiding sharks in there. But, Nightmare on Elm Street, actually, it was so terrified. I taught myself lucid dreaming because of that movie.
Oh, wow.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so that I could force myself to wake up.
I did that as a kid. I can't really lucid dream in the like true sense of being able to control what happens in my dream. But if I do realize I'm in a nightmare when I was a kid, I would be able to shut my eyes in the dream and wake myself up.
Yeah.
It's crazy how like as a child you or even as an adult, like you see these scary movies and you change the movie can make you change your lifestyle just because you just fear it so much.
Oh, when my mother showed me Poltergeist when I was 7 years old, and that was not a good idea.
No.
And it changed a lot of my habits.
Yeah. When I was very small, like also around 7, maybe younger, I snuck downstairs. Somebody, not my parents, because my parents don't like horror movies, but somebody downstairs was watching a horror movie. I don't remember who. I snuck downstairs to watch. And it was about a serial killer stuck in this big mansion where a family was getting together to divide the will or something. But the trick was the walls of the house were hollow. So the serial killer was getting around through the house, through the walls. And for years, I was terrified to sleep with my back to a wall. I had to face the wall so that I could anticipate when the serial killer in the wall would come out. So, yeah, it's weird how that works.
I distinctly remember being 4 years old and watching Child's Play for the first time. Now, if I were to watch that movie, I think it's like oddly hilarious. But back then, I saw a doll. I was like, nope, that is not good. Get this away from me.
Yeah.
So kind of moving forward, so one of the things that we can probably all agree on that makes, especially like Nightmare on Elm Street or the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, such great films, or, just great horror like milestones, is just the larger than life legends of their characters, whether it be Freddy or Leatherface. How as a GM do you feel, or even as a player, because you might be defining when you play a game a character that could be as memorable as this, whether you are the Nancy from Nightmare on Elm Street or the Laurie Strode. how do you get in the mindset of a proper horror villain, or even like a survivor, when you're role playing this out on the table?
So,
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Oh, okay. I would say that one of the biggest keys when you're designing a good antagonist is sort of keep pacing in mind.
Mhm.
So you don't want like you don't want whatever solution to the horror to be making lots of die rolls and using lots of obscure rules, because that will slow everything down as people keep rolling and checking the mechanics and looking rules up. A good example, I think, is in Stranger Things. In the first season, when they're trying to sort of jury rig this pod, so they've got someone pouring salt in the water and testing the
Mhm.
temperature of the water. And, you know, you've got a lot of really good pacing there. Everyone's doing something, but it's not like I hit the monster. I hit the monster again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Having something that having an antagonist that requires creativity and out of the box thinking in order to overcome, as opposed to just whacking away at it, I think is very important, because we're playing an RPG, and you know the majority of people, as a generalization, started with Dungeons and Dragons, and that's something you can generally hack your way through, unless you're, you know, DM or storyteller changes things up a bit.
Yeah.
But in the you know the basics of Dungeons and Dragons, you can hack your way through something like that. And I think it's really interesting when you meet an enemy that you can't do that with, and it causes you to have to think, and causes you to really your adrenaline spikes, because you're like, oh well, that was my plan, and ruining people's plans causes the most adrenaline in an RPG game.
Yeah. So I wrote an indie game which I'll plug here. It's called We Die Here, which I based on Stranger Things and It, and also Dark on Netflix. It's a German series
cool.
which I highly recommend everyone watches.
Dark is good.
But I specifically wrote the mechanics to be extremely unfavorable if you're going toe to toe with a monster, because my reasoning was if you're hitting it, something in your plan went wrong, or it's a really dire situation, and this was the best of a lot of bad options. But the game is geared to, you're not supposed to hit the monster. If you're hitting the monster, something went terribly wrong. So I specifically wrote the mechanics for that to be they're not brutal, but they're bad for you if you're fighting a thing. You're not supposed to do that.
Yeah. I love, as a player, I love any situation in an RPG where I can't do things. If I have limitations put on me, it's my favorite thing, because it requires me to then think outside the box and think differently, and it's so much fun for character development, but also just for the fun of playing a game when restrictions are put on you.
I think that any type of anything like that is cool. Like when a sense is taken away from you, even like I don't know if you saw "Don't Breathe" by Fede Alvarez, but it's and you know they couldn't. They were fighting someone that couldn't see, so they had to be quiet. And I think that taking away someone's ability to move or speak or see or hear, or even you know, just things that they're used to being able to do, can really build suspense and gameplay and be a lot of fun.
It kind of ties back into what Steffi said, even about isolation. Like Hush, like main character is deaf, and that is a scary thing when you're watching and you're seeing the main character. She's typing away on the computer, and there's the killer right behind her. And can't do anything because can't.
Hush I was very impressed by Hush. I just found it on Netflix one day and watched it, and I was very impressed.
Yeah, me too. I think there's even a scene in there where they remove all the sound so that you're hearing what she's hearing. Yeah. And that is one of the most terrifying things. Yeah.
I think
no,
go ahead.
My thing, my career started in actually working in haunted houses. I used to scare people in haunted houses when I was a kid. And my favorite thing, because so many people in the horror genre, be it, you know, films and haunts and things like that, really do rely on a lot of jump scares. It's something that it's easy. You make a loud noise when people aren't expecting. People jump, and that's the whole thing. It's an easy way to do it. And it was my favorite thing in the world to never use a jump scare and to scare people purely by being there with them and just causing them to have a reaction even though they've already seen me and they know where I am. And like I think that's an incredibly important thing too. With an antagonist in an RPG is they've seen him, they know where he is, but he or she is, or they are still terrifying, regardless of if you know where they are or not.
Yes. And also the subversion of mundane things, like in Get Out, there's this scene where the mother of the household is stirring a cup, and the spoon is just going tink, 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 and the suspense, because something bad does happen, mind you, but you know it's going to, and you can kind of see the protagonist go from this is weird to now I'm alarmed. And I think that is really well done, that focus on that cup. And I've actually had that used against me in a horror game once. I was playing Cthulhu, and we were playing a scene where we were just in a cafe ordering lunch. And the waitress, and it was just, we were talking and role-playing, and the waitress asked, would you like a Soggoth sandwich with that? Because we were talking, it was so natural. And actually it took me like a sentence or two to go, a what now? And she was like, an egg sandwich. Do you want an egg sandwich? And that was really, I've always remembered that mundane moment in the bar where suddenly my brain was playing catch up and going, wait, she just said something weird.
Yeah, that's awesome. No, it's subverting the expectations of where something is going to go as well. In that, like, if you've ever seen The Witch, which is another great horror movie. There was definitely a point in that movie, which I won't spoil, but it's where I was sure the movie was going to go in one direction, and then it went in a completely different direction from where I was sure it was going to go, and the entire rest of the movie was a mystery to me, and that was scary because I was like, oh, I know where this plot's going to go. It's going to go here and here and here, just because I'm used to horror movies and I watch a lot of them, and working on them, you kind of get a bit of like that, like I know the formula, but it just completely took a turn, and I was like, I have no idea where this is going now, and I'm on board, and this is great. And so doing that in an RPG where if your players think they know where it's going and you can flip that on its head, I think is a really great tactic to use.
Something that's interesting about like a more of like film to tabletop, a lot of tabletop RPGs, your players expect to be told like or explained everything by the end of it. They'll know. It doesn't matter how long the campaign takes or how long the adventure takes. By the end of it, they feel like they'll know why the bad guy did what he did, who's the bad guy, and how they did it. But as we see in a lot of movies, especially now in this sort of like independent surge of horror films in the past like 10 years, like we're seeing everything open-ended leaving when the credits roll. Now, in your personal opinions, do you feel that you rather would leave the ending open-ended, or do you like closure for your fellow players?
I'm super into stories that are just kind of open-ended, and as long as it's well written or well told or well played, it's about the journey for me. And if the journey leaves me wanting or wondering what would have happened next, that's fine with me.
Yeah, I also like if a story goes to a place where the players or the characters think they know what happened and who did it, and then the more they think about what happened, the more they realize they have no idea why it happened, and they have no idea what exactly caused it, and what they thought happened was just part of it. And like that, having people have doubts, I think, is something that causes a lot of anxiety and fear in an RPG, is when you don't know and you got out, but you don't know why you got out, or necessarily if you did get out, or if this is still part of it, or stuff like that.
I'm sorry, continue.
So I will, as a player, I will be legit cross with my GM if they do that. I truly dislike not knowing. It's ironic because I do like that in movies. I like it when movies and books don't spell things out. but give me enough information to build theories. But if I honestly have no idea, I had that once in a hunter campaign where the GM had this weird dreamscape vibe going on, and it was scary and it was baffling, and I was like, what was that and what was that? And he wouldn't tell me, and I was like, I am not sure we can be friends anymore. I wasn't. I mean, of course we were still friends, but I can get legit cross because I like knowing things. I'm curious by nature, and I can get truly frustrated when I don't know something. But I do it as a GM, so you know.
I think as long as the players get a satisfying character arc, it's okay to end with a little bit of ambiguity. And, you know, sort of like what Steffi touched on, as a GM, you have to know what your players would appreciate. So Shayne's okay with open-ended stories, but Steffi wants to know by the end of it, why did this happen that way? And, you know, it's your job as a GM to know that.
Yeah. And mind, it's not that my character needs to know, it's just that I need to know. So credits roll. Now tell me what the hell that was.
Yeah, no, I get that. Like, I'm also pretty good as a player with open-ended stuff, but I've had DM friends who won't tell me, and it drives me nuts. But as long as my character had a good arc and the story was good and I had fun, then I don't care. Ultimately, you know, having fun, and I mean, I have fun being scared. I have fun playing horror stuff. If I had fun, then it was a good use of time.
Yeah, fair.
You know.
Now, kind of to shift the discussion a little bit more, so we've talked about external threats. We're using like movie examples and stuff. What about when the players themselves are a threat to themselves and others? Kind of touching, like I said, I would touch back to, you know, of course we have two great actors from LA by Night on here. Vampires, you know, having like a hunger, but I mean, how is it being a player and knowing that, you know, there are other monsters out there, but you are one of the biggest monsters.
It's the best.
Yeah.
It's like it's the greatest. I mean, I think when you're role playing, which is very close to acting, you know, like the actor's logo, or like the Screen Actors Guild logo, is, you know, the mask of comedy and the mask of tragedy, and they're kind of next to each other.
Oh, you mean my clan symbols?
Yeah, your clan symbols. Yeah, sorry, forgot. But I always thought they should be like right on top of each other, kind of blending, because I think that my favorite characters are super complex, and there's not good guy and bad guy. There's, you know, guy and guy. Like everybody has a little bit of both inside of them. So it's fun playing a game when you can not only recognize that you have a bad side and that you're conflicted, but you can really embrace it and just run with it and lean into it.
Yeah, I'm very much on board with bad things happening to my character. It's I love it. But just knowing that there are actual consequences to actions that I make, and that there could be there's consequences to the point where I could no longer control what my character does, is so much fun to play with, because it feels like, because a lot of times in RPGs, if they're not, you know, if it's not always necessarily baked into the rules that there are extreme consequences to your player characters. Like, yeah, you can die, but sometimes death isn't the worst thing that can happen to a character. And so Vampire and a lot of World of Darkness games have a lot of punishments built into the game mechanics that are apart from just the death of your character, which I love. And so it really playing with that and knowing it's there and still running straight towards it and being like, I wonder if this is the day this gets me. And like, it's one of my favorite things about playing this game.
Sort of on that, you can also go with, you know, with Vampire, you've got the spiritual contagion of the beast. You can also translate that to be sort of a physical contagion. You know, and the best example I can think of is if I was running a zombie apocalypse game, have someone get bitten in a way that wasn't obvious. And so now they have to decide, like, am I going to tell my companions, hey
Mhm.
guys, I just got bit, or are they going to try to keep it together long enough to accomplish just one or two last things? And I think that tension of when am I going to start to turn? How is my end going to be? That I think would be a really cool character story. And it doesn't have to be a zombie bite. It could be aliens. You've
Mhm.
inhaled alien spores. Who knows
Mm.
how long you have, but it's not
Right.
very long.
Yeah, it's
I
I
think
think it's
10
also very
Candles is the game that. Okay.
yes.
Yeah.
You go.
Agreed.
No, you go.
No, it's something that I think it's very important that especially when playing a horror game and was obviously knowing what everyone at the table is okay with and the consent and what they've given and everything, but also it's important from the storyteller's stance to ask those questions and ask for the consent to do these things and if who's okay with what and who's not okay with what. But it is also important for the players to trust in the storyteller and let them, after you've given that consent, let them guide you through that, because buying in is going to make the game 100% better than if you're sitting outside of it. You gotta, as a player, buy into the story as what's happening and go along for the ride. Otherwise, it's not going to have the same effect because you're all imagining this together. There's no screen, there's no nothing usually, and so you all have to be on the same page in order to imagine together and all feel the same, vibe that's happening. And I think that's a really important thing, and it's also part of a player's responsibility when playing in a game.
Yeah, what I did for We Die Here is I wrote the mechanics so that people have to create ties to either each other's characters or to named NPCs. And one of those ties has to be a secret, and it has to be a genuinely bad secret. So it's not a secret that you're holding a secret and then it comes out and people are like, okay. But genuinely bad, like I slashed the tires of my current lover so that he would die and I could date him. That kind of secret. But that and the idea is, of course, that the players either all agree not to tell their character secrets or all agree to share them, because that's a matter of consent and how much mystery you want. But the idea is that those are bad things to come out and they're potentially going to ruin relationships while you're also fighting the killer clown.
Yeah.
And they've got wants and needs. A want is something that you do not have but want, and a need is something that you have and cannot do without. And because all of those have to tie into either each other or the named NPCs, you get a lot of conflicting emotions and actions, while there's also a very real supernatural threat going on. And I think that mechanics works really well for horror, because it creates that tension that I like in a horror group. That's my personal play preference, but I like that if there's, I don't mind if in the end they're just like, let's put all our differences aside, because again, there's a clown wanting to kill us. We've got bigger fish to fry. Focus, people, there's a problem. But I like it if there's a bit of tension.
Yeah, agreed.
Before they get there. So I specifically wrote it that way.
Well, stories are built on conflict. And if you have
Exactly.
no conflict in a story, you don't really have a story.
Exactly. Yeah.
And
I
so,
think, and if you've got the right group, you can get some character conflict in there. If you've got the right group and everyone signs off on it, and we're all clear on what we do and don't like.
Trusting players trusting each other is a huge thing. You have to trust the people you're playing with, or else you're not going to allow yourself to be vulnerable to have these moments happen. And also separating what you know outside of your character and what you know in your character is a very important thing, because that can really not only cause problems with the game as a whole, but also ruin someone else's moment.
Yeah.
If there's something that they have secret in character that's a very big deal for their character, and blah, 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 but you're all friends outside of the game and you talk about it, make sure you separate, because it's going to really bum that person out if their whole moment gets ruined because you preempt their big reveal. It just isn't fun. Like, it's like, I've been working for that for so long, and like,
I actually had that with my current group. That at one point we discussed, if people have secrets in character, do we want to know? And most of my players were like, no, it's fine. But they have known each other for 20 years as role players. But we also had a new person in the group who was like, I would want to know what your in-character secrets are. So we finally decided to just, obviously, if one person, if 12 people are okay and one person goes like, I'm not okay, then that's the voice you go with. So we laid it out on the table. But it was interesting to see that, that difference between several people going, I'm fine with the secrets because we all discussed what we do and don't want to see in the game, and I'm going to assume that your secret adheres to that.
Right.
And then obviously somebody new to the group who was like, oh. As it turns out, that person is also simply likes to know things. He likes to know how the rules work. He likes to know what the HP of the monster is. That's just the kind of, and I've learned to appreciate that. But it was funny coming in. I was like, I never tell my players what the HP of the monster is. They just find out.
The whole if it has stats, you can kill it.
In horror games, my creatures don't have stats, but that was Pathfinder actually.
Just to backtrack really quick to a point you made earlier, because Shayne was actually about to bring it up, 10 candles and talking about like what your character will do when pushed to the absolute edge or like their secret, because they like that's one of the big mechanics in there is the whole like brink system, and you decide that for your other players, or for each player decides that for the one sitting next to them.
I love that game. I've never played it, but I have the book and I've read the book, and I think that the most exciting aspect of the game to me is just interacting with the people in your group the whole time like normal, and then they might have something or know something that completely changes your perspective of them in a moment of uncertainty. I love that part of the game, and just going into it not really knowing who to trust, but you have to trust them because they are who you're stuck with.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the coolest things about horror RPGs for me, and it's something that I work on a lot of horror sets. I do it's most of what I do, and when you're on set, there's very little fear. It's just you're all doing your job, you're doing the scene, you're doing when you're in it, it's great. But then you break, you walk over to Crafty, whatever. But you spend so much time in RPGs in that character and in that situation for extended lengths of time. And it's so much fun. And it's one of the reasons I love playing horror RPGs, because I get to experience that and be in that character's shoes and experience that for such a long extended period of time. And it is something I don't get when I'm on set and working on these shows, because you're worrying about so many other things and dealing with like, okay, I got to do this and I got to do that. Saying next, I got to prepare. I got to go put on my harness after this and blah, 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 all the things. Horror RPGs, you're just sitting at a table and you get to experience all this stuff in the story and everything. And it's just so much more relaxing and freeing to be able to do it in this medium.
Yeah, I really agree. And I think that when you are running a horror game, if you're the GM and even if you're the players, everyone should have a certain amount of buy-in to maintain that immersion.
Yeah.
Because, like, you can't just casually watch a horror movie. You've got to allow yourself to be completely drawn in. Otherwise, you're not going to get the right experience. And I think the same is true for a game. And so when you're running a horror game, like, ban cell phones. No one gets to play on their phone while we're playing. Everybody's focused on the table. And cut down on distractions, and if you've got like a closed off room that you can play in, play there.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. So, since we're getting to about the end of our panel here, I have a kind of what I consider a pretty fun question. So hopefully this will let you rack your brains a bit. So in the past year, we've been seeing more and more like film IPs getting converted into tabletop RPGs. I have one right behind me, Alien, which just came out like pretty much.
I want to play that real bad.
They have actual plays going on of Alien and 10 Candles, so if you're looking to play, both of you just need to drop into one. But in your mind, what movie would you love to see being turned into a tabletop RPG property?
Um, they're turning, I heard before the COVID crisis that they were turning Event Horizon into a series. And I mean, that's a lot like Alien, except for there's a supernatural element. And I think any game that takes place where the environment could kill you, like just being on a spaceship in space would be scary enough for me,
Yeah,
let
exactly.
alone with ghosts. But I think that would be an awesome RPG.
I'm also a big fan of sci-fi and like space stuff because that's so much unknown is there, and it's so much fun to play in that space. But if I was to say one movie or franchise that I would want as an RPG, I really like, and it may be, maybe people didn't see it. There's a movie called Pandorum with Dennis Quaid and Ben Foster. And it's a really great kind of sci-fi horror movie. And I think that would be a fun one to turn into an RPG. Just off the top of my head.
Steffi, Rachel?
I don't have any because I think you can emulate. You could take any movie that you like and emulate that atmosphere if you find the right game mechanic for it. So I don't necessarily need a movie translated into a book. I'm very glad that they did Alien, by the way, because that's one of my favorite movies.
Same.
And that book is genuinely so good at bringing the atmosphere of Alien into a game. But anytime I think of, I want to play that movie as a game, I could probably do it with mechanics at hand. So I don't have an answer here.
Yeah.
That's fair.
Sort of riffing on what Steffi has said, I mentioned at the beginning of the panel, I've been doing work for a company called Mighty Narwhal, and they're putting out Mora, which is meant to translate cinema to game. And it's got a lot of really cool stuff. It's got like the light mechanics that I talked about. And we do have a couple horror genres because it's meant to be we package up a genre and you just play it out of the box. So we've got like Ravenswood Academy, which is, Harry Potter, but it's Lovecraft. And so my thought is, I want to play Alien, I want to play The Omen, I want to play Jurassic Park. So I'm like, I'll just go to Mora and build the right genre for that.
Yeah.
And then one more question then for Steffi, so what would be your go-to system if you wanted to run a horror? Obviously, you've worked on so many.
Yeah.
What would be your go-to system?
It depends. So I'm really partial to my own system that I designed for my game.
That's fair.
And I'm hearing Rachel talk about Mora, and I'm absolutely going to get that. But barring those two, I'm going to go with Alien, because what the movie does well is something that often doesn't work in games. It's the why hasn't the thing eaten you yet? This movie could have been over in 2 seconds. 1 second if people had listened to Ripley, 2 seconds if the aliens just would have eaten everyone. But they don't for some weird reason. And they actually have a mechanic for that. And I think that is, I think that's excellent because that is one of the hardest things. So I'm going to go with my game, Rachel's game, Alien.
Boom.
In no particular order.
That's awesome.
All right, and then the final question before we wrap this up: if you were to recommend just any horror movie in general that some people might not have watched or might have just slid under the radar, what would you recommend?
I would recommend the movie Audition. Ooh. And just watch it. Don't look it up. Just watch the movie. Don't look up anything about it because it will spoil it. Just watch the movie.
It's a little bit of a rough watch, but it's good.
It's rough, but if you're into it, if you're into horror and you're into rough, you're down for whatever, watch that movie.
One of my favorites of all time, and I'm always surprised by how many people have never seen it before, is The People Under the Stairs by Wes Craven.
Oh, yeah.
It's absolutely wonderful, and I don't want to give too much away about it if you've never seen it, but it's one of my favorites.
Yeah.
I can't lie. I've never even heard of that movie until now, so I will be watching that tonight then.
Yeah, please. I think you would really like it.
I really like A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night.
Ooh, yeah.
Yep.
The storytelling's
That's
really
good.
good. The main actress is super talented, and it's got the right sort of pacing and suspense and inversions. And like for me, it's power fantasy. Like I can walk alone at night. It's great.
Yeah.
I would probably go with the People Under the Stairs. Yeah,
Mhm.
I actually saw that one.
It's good.
So 2 votes for People Upstairs. I guess that definitely we gotta watch that tonight. All right, then. I think that's all the time we have for today. Thank you everyone who joined in and watching us, and thank you to my amazing panelists for having one hell of a discussion. Stay tuned for more Virtual Horror Con, and have a great day, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Hi, thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye.